My name is Mary Jane Uzzi, and I am a sophomore at Grinnell College. And I'm going to talk about some of the factors that influence college graduation rate. First, I'd like to thank my co-author, Lou Lee, another Grinnell College sophomore. And this project was done as part of an introductory statistics class at Grinnell College. So I also want to thank our professor and mentor, Dr. Ryan Miller, for his help during this project. So a little bit of the agenda for my presentation. I'll first talk about our research question and the background. Then I'm going to turn to our data, the data set and some of the methods we used. And then our statistical testing and calculations results. And then finally, some discussion of the limitations and relevance of this project. So according to the Economic Mobility Project, and according to many people, I think that you would ask today, the key to today's economy is a college degree. And yet out of 100 high school students, only about 30 will make it to college graduation. So this is a big disparity. And for this project, we're interested in seeing what kind of factors are associated with a high graduation rate at US colleges and universities, and what factors are associated with a lower graduation rate. We chose to use a 6-year graduation rate because that's what the Department of Education typically uses. And then we looked at certain factors such as the gender makeup of the college. So if it has all men, all women, or both sexes. We also looked at different graduation rates, averages across race groups in the United States. Then we also wanted to see how student finances impact graduation rate or are associated with graduation rates, including the median household income of the students at a university, the percentage of students that are receiving Pell grants at a university, which are like need-based scholarships given by the government. And we also wanted to look at an academic predictor. So we used the average SAT score of the attending students to compare with the graduation rate at a US college and university. So first we started, as far as the data, with the Department of Education's College Scorecard most recent institutional data set, which has data through the 2017-2018 school year. And it had 6,806 rows or different colleges at the beginning. And we sort of pared that down to only about 1,300 rows of colleges by focusing solely on institutions that grant a bachelor's degree or higher and that have some level of in-person instruction. So this is all pre-coronavirus. So any college that is online fully right now, but plans to go back to in-person instruction eventually is included in our data set. So again, a little bit of a roadmap for the testing and results. First, we did some ANOVA tests with race and gender, and then we calculated a correlation coefficient for the SAT score association with graduation rate. And then finally, we combined the academic and financial factors to create a multiple regression model that would predict average graduation rate at a school. So first, we can turn to the ANOVA testing. And on the left, I think it's your left, you can see in figure 1, the box plots of co-ed average graduation rate, the average graduation rate for men-only schools, and then for women-only schools. And our hypothesis, the null hypothesis, is that all of these average graduation rates are the same, and we did not get a p-value that was low enough to disprove that null. So we did not find statistically significant evidence or any statistical significant difference between the graduation rates across different types of colleges. Then we can turn to the second side of the slide, figure 2, which has the average graduation rates for different race groups. So basically, each college reports their average graduation rate for students of different races. And we took all of those graduation rates by races and averaged them to create these racial national graduation rates. We found that when we did our ANOVA test that there was not a statistically significant difference in graduation rate between Asian and white students, but that there was a statistically significant difference between the Black and Hispanic students compared with the Asian and white students, and that both of those have statistically lower graduation rates on average nationally. So then we can turn to the correlation and the regression parts of the model. So first we then decided to calculate a correlation coefficient to see how the average SAT score of attending students is associated with the mean graduation rate observed at a college. And this is a very strong positive correlation that we found, 0.811. So average, very high SAT scores of the students on average tends to be associated with a very high graduation rate of the school. And you can see the 95% confidence interval for the R value is also included there. And then we turn to our multiple regression model, where we use the average SAT score variable, the percentage of students that receive Pell grants from the federal government, and the median household income to predict the graduation rate percentage. And this model that you see was able to account for about 72% of the variance in the graduation rate variable. So just to point out some of the highlights, the 100-point increase in average SAT score is associated with an 8.75% increase in graduation rate, a 1% increase in Pell Grant recipients at a school is associated with a 10% decrease in graduation rate. And then an increase of $10,000 in students' median household income is associated with a 4% increase in graduation rate. And all of those each of those is holding the other variables constant in the model. But I would just turn your attention to the Pell Grant particular section of it, because just a small increase in the financial situation of the students can correspond with such a strong difference in educational attainment. So finally, I want to talk a little bit more about the limitations and the relevance of what our study was thinking about. So again, I want to just put this out there that this was an observational study. So we did not manipulate any of the variables, race, sex, finances, or academic factors. So we can't necessarily say that these factors cause any changes in graduation rate. But this is sort of a jumping off point so that future research could maybe go into more depth with each of those factors in a more experimental way with manipulation of an independent variable. As far as like more specific issues with that we found and limitations of the study, in the United States, there are very small sample sizes for colleges and universities that only educate a single sex or single gender. So one thing that future research could do to address this would be to look to international single-sex colleges and universities and look at those graduation rates, or even turn to like single-sex or single-gender high schools in the United States and look at different factors that are associated with graduation rate for them. And then secondly, that SAT score policies vary across different schools, different colleges and universities. Some require students to submit SAT scores for admission. Some are SAT optional. So the predicting element of SAT scores on graduation rate could be somewhat skewed if SAT score reporting is optional to be higher. Also, I mean, we could talk about how SAT score might not be the most like the best predictor of academic success or potential. So future research could also just sort of avoid the whole SAT question and use GPA, for instance, as an academic predictor of graduation rate. I also wanted to address the fact that correlations may exist between the graduation rates of different race groups for a given college. So in future studies, like looking at predicting, for example, the Hispanic student graduation rate at Grinnell, which is my school, it might be more useful to adjust from the overall graduation rate at Grinnell rather than from the national Hispanic student graduation rate. So yeah, future research may further investigate institutional correlations between race graduation rates. And then just the relevance. So many colleges are facing difficulty with COVID-19 right now, and keeping graduation rates up is a concern for our economy over the next 3 to 5 years. So just it's important for colleges to know these things and to keep like pandemic practices, design pandemic related practices to continue graduation rates so that the US can continue to have a like sustainable workforce over the next 5 years. And then I would be remiss not to mention right now the public confrontation of systemic racism happening in the United States, and that financial like factors and their educational implications, such as in graduation rate of income and race, like class disparities. So colleges and greater society also should be responsible for graduating more students, but also graduating students more equitably. Because as I talked about in the beginning, if a college degree is the key to the modern economy, we want everyone to have access to that. And those are my references. So thank you so much for listening. If you have questions, I will go look at them.